Freshly pressed on Smooth 98.1.
Mike's are up. Studio is live. Studio silence, please. Good morning, and thank you very much for staying tuned to Smooth 98.1. And this is Smooth Breakfast with Valentine Ohu.
And Ayo Mairo Ese. Good morning, Lagos.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning. Please send messages through WhatsApp to 0809 That is our WhatsApp number. We have other means through which you can have a communication with us and share your thoughts.
You can also send your messages to YouTube, Smooth 981 FM Lagos, and on Twitter we are Smooth 981 FM. Kindly use the hashtag with freshly pressed 981, and on our WhatsApp platform is 0809 444
And we are joined this morning for the analysis of Freshly Pressed 981 by Gbolahan, Mr. G Quest. Good morning, Gbolahan.
Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Valentine. And good morning, Lagos.
Good morning, Gbolahan. Thanks.
Welcome. Let's start with this first story from Premium Times. Now, Buhari unveils Nigeria's new visa policy. Remember how some weeks back, the conversation, well, he was quoted as, saying, amongst other things in his address, abroad, talking about the visa policy for, or rather, the visa on arrival for those with AU passports. It's contained in this new visa policy. But take us through the story, Bola.
Well, let me start by commending the Nigerian government for this effort. It's a wonderful initiative that has been carried out by the federal government. And just as you rightly said, we first of all got wind of this while the president was attending the African summit in Egypt a few weeks back, where he did mention that a lot of African nations now would be enjoying the opportunity of having their visas on arrival when upon the point of entry into Nigeria. So this is a follow-on, and this is fleshing out that policy, which is called, or it has actually been tagged the Nigerian visa policy 2020.
Yeah.
And amongst those policies, there are several policies that is looking at areas of health, education, tourism, and also, of course, business. We know what the importance of applications for visa is in Nigeria and even to the rest of the world. Of course, this application for visas also contribute towards the ease of doing business. When you look at the World Bank's ranking for ease of doing business, how easy is it for investors to come into your country to apply for visas? How easy is it? These are one of those criteria that they look at. So what this has done is that it's simplified the processes. And the idea behind it, just as the government has said, or the federal government has said, is that it's to attract innovation, specialized skills, and also knowledge from abroad, so that people can bring in their technical know-hows into the country, and they're able to improve our economy and grow the economy, basically. So there's several improvements into it. There's several benefits to it. We're talking about, just as I said, FDI improvement to encourage tourism into the country as well. So it's a good move.
Thank you very much.
However, the only thing I would just like to point out is, it's one thing to have policies on ground, implementation is another thing. Of course, we know the issues that we had when we talked about the visa on arrival. There was a lot of confusion as to how this process would work, and even when it gets to the people that are on ground, how implementable are they able to implement as well? Because of course we know that sometimes we also encourage bottlenecks which are caused by humans that are on ground, to make the situation a little bit more challenging for people to get these visas done. So it's one thing to have the documentation, it's another thing to implement. And I would expect that the government will see this through and implement it effectively.
Speaking about effectiveness and eliminating the bottlenecks that are created by human factors, the Comptroller General of the Nigerian Immigration Service, Mohammed Babandede, also said that the service had already put in place a technological hub that's called the Migrants Information and Data Analysis, MIDAS, to ensure strict compliance with conditions for the issuance of visa. It's also worthy of note that the new policy has 79 categories that include the sectors that Gbolahan mentioned: health, education, tourism, etc. And also that the fact that the EFCC and the National Intelligence Agency and Interpol made contributions or inputs into that system. Let's move.
Just very quickly, what I just wanted to say is that, I mean, our passport system is meant to be done online, but we know the problems that we face when we are applying for the passport online.
Well, two different things, so don't relate it, but yeah, it's two different processes.
So technology.
Thank you very much. Let's move on. This next story from the Punch newspaper speaks to still immigration issues, but specific to the customs. They investigate $8.07 trillion or million dollars seized at the Lagos airport. So they intercepted 2.9, the value of the currency in dollars, in naira, 2.92 billion naira.
How much?
2.92 billion.
2 billion.
Yeah, 2.92 billion. Yes. So 8.065, not so much money now, is it?
Chicken feet.
In Nigeria, $8.065 or million dollars as packed in 6 Ghana must go bags. They intercepted this. They said they apprehended one person in connection with that amount. They made a lot of statements. When I say they, I'm referring to the Controller General of Customs, Colonel Hamid Ali. He said the cash that was in $100 denominations. He spoke about, the security issues, money laundering issues. Valid points, right? But your thoughts on the story and the remarks he made regarding this intercept. My own point, right? The point where that raised concern for me is the fact that the money was intercepted on January 16th, as the reports had, at the E-wing of the International Airport tarmac. Inventory was taken 2 days later, 48 whole hours later.
Well, I mean, we can pardon them for that. And when we're talking about inventories even being taken 2 days later, at least what they've reported is that when the inventory was taken, there were other members of several government agencies that were also involved in the inventory taking. It mentioned EFCC, talked about several other agencies.
Yes, I understand. But 48 hours is a long time. Just keep that kind of money lying around.
It is a long time.
Without it is naturally, verifying how much it is.
You can still allow them on that. But my own area of grouse is, listen to this. When we talked about the investigate that on January 16th, the bags were intercepted and monies were found in it, $8 million, which, as you said, translates to about 2 billion naira, which is a lot of money in Nigerian terms. Now, we're talking January 16th now, and it was found out that the people that were also involved, or the owners of the coastal buses, belonged to the Nigerian Aviation Handling Company, NACO, meant to be the agency that has been given the authority of controlling and managing baggages, handling company at the airport. Yeah. So they've given these people do have authorizations to classified areas and places that you're not meant to go to. So now the coastal buses belong to them, but in this same report, it's been said that NACO was stating that they are not aware of this incident and that they have also contacted the Nigerian Customs Service to give them adequate information as to who they have apprehended, who works for
them. Did they contact the custom officials before or after the money was found?
No, of course it was after. It had to be after the money was found, because of course you cannot contact them if you didn't know anything of it. The customs contacted the Nigerian NACO, the handling agency, and they have now gotten in touch with the Nigerian Customs Service, but the Customs Service has not actually revealed the identity of this person that was apprehended with the $8 million. Now, this raises a lot of questions when we're talking about investigation. I mean, why go to the media so early, even when the investigation is yet to be concluded yet? I mean, you found out about this on January 16th. You did an audit of it on the 18th, but yet those parties that were involved in the situation, you haven't done a thorough investigation. And many a times we've seen such incidences happen in Nigeria where items are confiscated by the Nigerian Customs Service, but they never get to the end of it. They never get to the investigation. And when you don't get to the investigation of such, and you do not end up getting justice served eventually. Because, I mean, just apprehending and confiscating the money is not good enough. But getting to the root cause and who is responsible for this is where you get justice.
It sounds very good, but let's break down the English. You find 2.92 billion naira in 6 Ghana Must Go bags in $100 denominations. You don't know who has it. You find that it was kept in a bus that belongs to an authority that gains access into sensitive areas, like you said, which means it'll pass a lot of checks.
Absolutely.
Nobody's going to stop the bus, or nobody probably would check the bag. Whoever discovered this perhaps did not get information as to the ownership of the content or whatever it is in the bag, or the veracity of where it's coming from or anything, or probably decides to ask questions. That's just one person, maybe one entity out of a lot that was ignorant or left in the loop. You see where I'm going, right?
Oh, of course.
And then 48 hours, let's not downplay that, because when you get to the airport, you are asked to declare monies in excess of $10,000, and they will make you count it in their presence, right? 48 hours passed. You found the money January 16th. You waited till January 18th before you counted the money. That is the reality that we're facing right now.
I think a number of people also share your sentiments and are questioning the fact that we're saying that 48 hours is not anything to raise an eye for. Tunji says, you're not on the street. 48 hours and you think nothing happened to that money. And then
and somebody who gains access to NACO or gets authorization to use their bus definitely is highly placed.
And then EJ says, how can you pardon the taking of even inventory 48 hours after an impoundment? And then Ian says, the money is so much that Val, who used to remind us when we have spent too much time on the news, is extending the analysis. Yes, indeed, we have so many, important stories to touch on this morning, some of them involving money and the lack of transparency.
Yeah, it just raises, there are a lot of loopholes in this system, because, of course, whoever has been apprehended is probably maybe the lower cadre guy.
Of course,
they need to go to the kingpins. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Let's go to the next story before I just dwell on that money. Premium Times says representatives uncover yet another sum, 65 billion naira non-remittance in Federal Airports Authority. Still very interesting that we're on the airports today. The flight hasn't taken off yet. Now, the House of Representatives Committee, who's investigating on finance issues, has uncovered 65 billion naira unpaid revenue remittances from the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria. One case in point was this year, I think 2019, between 2014 and 2019, they said they expected by the books, according to the projections and everything, recurrent expenditure and income and all that revenues, they said the remittance was expected to be to the tune of 74.66 billion naira from FAN within that period in view, but only 9 billion was remitted. I mean, these are investigations. These are reports from the committee. What necessary actions will be taken after this? What do you think?
Well, this just highlights the numerous leakages that we have in our government parastatals all over the country. This is just a classic example of what we see. Just as you said, this audit that was done by the House of Representatives was between 2014 to 2019, and in between that space, 65 billion naira was found to be missing out of the Federal Airport Authority's accounts. And these accounts are not even accounts that was given by the Accountant General of the Federation. These are simple accounts that have been presented to the National Assembly by the Federal Airport Authorities themselves. So there is nothing that they were, these are their books.
That means the books were not balanced.
Yeah, absolutely. The books were not balanced. It's just bewildering to find out that we have agencies that generate a lot of money, but yet the government and the people and the citizens of Nigeria are not seeing the benefit of this amount of monies that are being generated by these agencies.
So would you excuse this as maybe mistakes in math? Maybe somebody did not calculate well, or there are loopholes. We're
talking about a difference of 65 billion. I mean, between 2014, we're talking between 2014 and 2019. About 74 billion was meant to be remitted. Only 9 billion got remitted. that definitely cannot be a mathematical error.
There's a similar story that we took about on this about a month ago. One other agency. So ministries, departments, and agencies, we know they've been knocking and delaying the budget passing for several years.
Yes.
Only this year, last year, I mean, this 2019, 2020 cycle that we brought it back to January to December because of Buhari.
Talking about that, I wanted to link that into the story from the Guardian newspaper. Protests as Senate ignores AGF OK's 238.15 billion naira for customs. That's the Nigerian Customs Service. And this is amidst allegations of breaches and abuses by the agency. Now, Val, when you mention the agencies not remitting, not being transparent, not disclosing their budget, not presenting an audited account. These were some of the things that were highlighted by the Senate Gbolahan. They talked about the fact that they had approved this huge sum of money as budget for the Nigerian Customs Service, and that there were a few things that they were not satisfied with, and that is the way that the NCS hasn't been in terms of the allocations, previous allocations. And now we don't want a situation in a few years whereby we notice that a certain amount of money was meant to have been remitted. Only a percentage, like 5% of that money was actually remitted. How can we check excesses like this?
I mean, it's what this is one of the mantras that the President Muhammad Buhari's administration rode into power with, was to tackle corruption and to improve the systems. And one of those things that he did when he came into power then was the Treasury single account, which one still has to ask, what exactly has been the advantages that we have gained of the Treasury single account when we're looking at such reportings as this, that we're not seeing enough accountabilities from most of all the agencies that we have. Just as the Nigerian Customs Service, we're reporting now that the National Assembly is accusing the customs agencies of not utilizing our funds judiciously. The Treasury single account will come into mind then. How effective has that been? One would expect that there should be an audit of how much gains we've made over the years as to before the Treasury single account came into effect. And the benefits of that is that, of course, a lot of monies are now going into a single account. Back in the days, we used to have government agencies with numerous accounts all across the various banks, and that used to cause a lot of problems in terms of monitoring and evaluation. But with the TSA now, it should be easier to monitor all these monies that are coming into the government account. But yet, I believe that the National Assemblies are still not doing enough in terms of oversight functions, and we need to see a lot more done by the National Assemblies. We need to see a lot of these investigations being carried out by the Senate, by the National Assembly, to unravel a lot of all these monies that are hiding in several places. That we just need to do better.
But that's why we're getting to know about this, because they're doing their job.
Well, I mean, this is just a tip of the finger.
Yeah, but I mean, it's revealing things that we didn't know about before.
Yes, I need to mention here that earlier when we took the news story, I think it was last week, that the Auditor General of the Federation had recommended that the Senate or the House not approve budgets for NDAs that haven't submitted audited accounts yesterday. Thank you. Audited accounts. Well, we see today that despite that recommendation, they have still okayed a huge sum of money for an agency that has not produced audited accounts.
Because it says a lot about, I mean, how effective the National Assembly is working. We just need to see a lot more from them.
Implementation, hard stance. Let's move on to this next story. This one talks about Lagos, really. Someone launches strategic document to tackle social, economic, physical challenges. It's reported on the Guardian newspaper. When you check this story, the Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu, yesterday, he launched a strategic document that will help Lagos tackle its socio-economic and physical challenges amidst the uproar regarding the bike ban in 15 local government areas in Lagos State. The document was tagged Lagos Resilience Strategy. The governor was represented by Commissioner for Economic Planning and Budget, Mr. Sam Igube, said that the launch of the document will provide an empirical background for all its policies and also aid his plans to speedily transform the state to a more resilient city. One of the things we noted in the conversation on the ban of bikes and tricycles is the fact that most people do not even realize the reason why or the reason behind these decisions or this new policy change. Even the enforcers, we've had cases where they've had issues with that. But Gbolahan, with understanding this information and this policy that's been passed, what do you make of it? What do you make of the story?
Well, I mean, to me, all I can see in the story is just sound bites to me. If I'm sorry to say that, when you're talking about the developing and implementation of a resilience strategy, what exactly do you mean by resilience strategy? And the story goes on to say that with this policy, they're looking at combating flooding, urban planning, improving emergency responses, providing quality healthcare services, and potential support for the youth in developing them technology and delivery of robust transportation system. Yeah. What exactly do we mean by this? These are general terms that you expect a typical government without a resilient strategy to be doing. I mean, we're talking about the healthcare transportation service, talking about also introduction of technology into the master plan of the mega city.
So are you saying it's bad?
There's nothing wrong with it, but to me, as to how you're going to implement all of this, there's nothing new here when we're talking about combating flooding. A few years ago, we did have situations of combat flooding. What you need to do is you're looking at clearing out your drainages. We don't need all this big grammatical English that is being used here. We just need people getting down to doing the job. I mean, they're simple things.
You don't just go on the road to start breaking ground.
Valentine.
To build. Hang on.
Okay, go on.
You don't just go on the road to start breaking ground without making a plan and making your plan clear. If your plan is not clear to you, your strategy, if you don't have a strategy and a clear plan to execute, it will fail.
What plan do you need when we're talking about clearing out your drainages? What plans do you need when you're talking about resurfacing your roads? Roads are bad. What plan do you need?
Does Lagos have a concrete plan, a clear plan?
They've always talked about, but Lagos has always talked about a master plan. They've always had a master plan that yet no one is releasing. This, we're talking about a resilience strategy too. Is anybody going to see this resilience strategy that they're talking about too? We do have a master plan already.
All right, so I was going to agree with you, Gbolahan, in that in all the newspaper publications, we don't have a detail of that strategy. Hold on, I tried to search as well online. I didn't find details. However, it doesn't remove the importance of having a strategy document for a state. The Lagos state government have said that this strategy will form the backbone for decisions that will be made to make Lagos that mega city. It's also important to note that it contains 3 pillars, 10 goals, 31 initiatives. So it is broken down. However, because it was newly launched yesterday, we do not have the details yet. For many of us, we'll notice that around Lagos yesterday, there were posters. There was a new campaign drive towards this particular strategy. I mean, a committee was launched in November last year involving the permanent secretaries, representatives of UNILAG, LASU, and some civil society organizations towards developing this strategy document. So it's too early to knock it. We haven't seen the details yet. However, it will form the base. So we're looking out for the details of this.
Can I just say that anyway, the common man on the street that is walking up and down Lagos doesn't really care or comprehend the whole resilience strategy thing. All we want to see is the benefit. Let us feel it. Let our roads be free, well laid out roads. We're talking about drainage systems too. When the rain starts to pour as well, I hope people will not be caught in the flooding. So let's see. Resilience strategy.
Kasim says the House has oversight functions on such things as the state of finance. Please, what is the finance minister's responsibility? Things like this just make one lose hope in the country. He also adds to this last story, a strategy is and how to execute a plan.
Absolutely.
Emmanuel from Ikeja says, in any responsible organization, plans are laid out before they are implemented, not afterwards, to prevent the inevitable resistance that change engenders. The Lagos State government has put the cart before the horse once again.
All right, I think it's worthy to note that this strategy does not include your Okada ban. We're going to that story next. So this strategy is for Lagos State as a whole, not just this ban. Now, moving on to the next headline from the Punch newspaper, Sanwo-Olu inaugurates ferries, says Okada Mara ban irreversible. Yesterday, the governor inaugurated 14 commercial ferries at the Badore Ferry Terminal in Naija. And according to this, they can take up to 40 to 60 passengers at a go. He's promised that they'll increase these numbers before the end of the year. Please take us to the story, Gbolahan.
Well, I mean, it's a good move. When we're talking this story, I still don't know. Hold on. I still don't know where I stand anyway on this government's ban on the Okada. The one reason is that I would say, on one hand, yes, the citizens are being affected greatly. On the other hand, we do know that these Okadas constitute a public nuisance to society.
Right.
And we know that something needs to be done when we're talking about regulation of these Okada drivers. They are a law on their own. When you have an incident with them, I don't know if any of you has really had an incident with them, and you should see the way they gang up against you, even though it's their fault and they run in front of you, you should see the way they gang up against you. They take the laws into their hands. So, I mean, when we're talking about the ban, we need to provide alternative solutions to the ban, which is what the state government is doing now. And they've talked about providing 14 commercial ferries at the Badore axis, which will commute to Ikorodu, Ebutoero, CMS, Badore, and Ikoyi areas. And they're also talking about rolling out more ferries, 30 of them, and 500 time between now and the end of the year, which is. But the question I would ask is that why didn't the government do all of these before the ban came into effect? Because, of course, at the end of the day, what is going to happen is that citizens are going to suffer in the interim, pending the time that all these palliative measures are put in place and the alternatives come in. So it's a good move. When we're talking about a mega city, everything needs to be regulated.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, go on.
I paint an analogy with a pipe that has two branches, right? With holes on all the ends, right? And you're pumping water from one main source, and it branches out from the other two. So it's actually one way, one directional the first time. And you now create an alternative source, like outlet, which makes it two at the end. If you want the water channel to flow to the other alternative, would you leave the first one open or block it?
So of course you block it.
Exactly. So if the government now put in place this ban, I mean, from what you're saying, I mean, it would be hoped, even me, I said it at some point, that the government should have put this plan in place, or place alternatives before the ban was put. But if you think about effectiveness of encouraging citizens to open their eyes to the other alternatives that are available, don't you think the government is taking it in the right step, putting the ban in place? I mean, them from different local governments, not everywhere in Lagos, and then providing these ferries so that at least people will see that there's a palliative in place.
Well, I mean, if you're looking at it that way, I would see that as not being business friendly.
Okay.
The reason why I would say that is that you're literally turning everything into a monopoly then, because what you're trying to do is that you're trying to divert all the business activities onto one side. And now that raises a lot of questions as to who owns these lag ferry services.
It belongs to the Lagos State government.
Are you sure it belongs to
Of
Lagos
course
State
it
government?
does.
It might be a
could be a
PPP.
yes.
Exactly. So you should be careful. So no one knows who owns it there. So that raises that question.
Thank you very much. Ngozi here says the government rolls out buses and ferries, but what plans do they have for maintenance? It's always a problem in Nigeria.
Very well said, thanks. Then Chibuna says, while I'm sure your views about the criticism that the document should be based on the political ideology of the party, the issue with that document will be whether it will outlive its developers. Lagos will continue to roam around the roundabouts without making sustainable progress. Lagos should stop comparing itself with other states in Nigeria. It should compare itself with Mumbai, New York, Atlanta, and other mega cities. And I'm really glad that you're comparing us with such mega cities. That's really hopeful. We move on to our next story very quickly. Gbolahan. National Assembly seeks suggestions on dealing with hate speech, fake news. Very quickly, the Dial Communication had a town hall meeting with the president of the Senate, Ahmed Lawan, and it was an opportunity for stakeholders to speak as to how best to tackle hate speech Can you just take us to 1 or 2 points?
I mean, what I just wanted to say that I hope this town hall meeting that they're having is an inclusive town hall meeting, and is one of those that covers everybody in it, so that I mean we can get the different point of views from all the different angles, because of course we know this hate speech and the fake news hate speech bill. We've been about it for quite a while, and the problem with it is that where do you draw the lines between what is between the freedom of speech and
Yes.
hate speech? And this is very, very important for a developing and a fledgling democracy. In order not to stifle freedom of speech, you have to be very, very careful with this hate speech. So if they're carrying out these town hall meetings, it has to be all inclusive so that they can get all the angles of everybody. Because of course, what we're talking about is drop the entire bill completely. But if you must go ahead with it, you have to make sure that all angles are covered.
Perfect, thank you. Eji says if the speed with which the state government released the first batch of ferries is anything to go by, then we might not wait for King for the buses. The trek will not kill anyone. It's rather good for our health, he said.
Yes, thank you very much indeed for your comments. I don't know how it's making fun of what some people find.
Somebody else wrote
serious.
hashtag keep walking, hashtag Lagos walks. Freshly Pressed 91 is the hashtag really for us to have the conversation on social media. Thank you very much, Gbolahan. You can find him at Mr. G Quest on Twitter. And Ayo and I will be here as we continue the broadcast for today. Next, we'll be talking sports inside of the locker room. Stay with us.
Exercise is good for you. I'm impressed that Nigerians are embracing this then, which is good,
No,
man.
we just
I
talk
mean,
about everything.